Okay, so number 4 is probably, in my opinion, one of the tougher problems because you really have to know what is my left, what is my right, and what is my midpoint in this particular case. So we really have to be careful here. So this one talks about up here, it says you have this lot that's bounded by a stream and 2 straight roads that meet at a right angle. So what they mean is they're trying to find a way to tell you to use a coordinate plane. So there's my 2 roads, right, that meet at this right angle. And then I've got some kind of a stream flowing and meeting. It's crossing both of those roads, so it's bound in there. So this one is saying my x values go from 0 up to 300. So this is my 0, and I'm going all the way up to 300, which is where my y value is 0. So it's crossing right there. Same thing here, I started at 0, my y value there is 450, so this right here is 450. And then each of these values in between, they continuously go down, so it's going down, 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 down until I get to 0 there, right? And all of these values along the way, this is, they're counting by 50s, so 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, my 300 did not work out there. Let me push it over a little bit so that it makes more sense. Sorry about that. Let's push these over. Okay, so let's say this is 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300. That's a little bit better, but you get the idea. Okay, so there we can kind of mark it out that direction. Now this is, for me, it's important for me to see this x-axis and what's happening, because when I'm talking about this stuff over here, I really want to be able to see those intervals so that I know what I'm talking about. So this one is saying I'm going to use my left endpoints, and I'm going to use n equals 6. That means I have 6 subintervals or 6 rectangles, right? So if I count these, if I just divided it off right at where I had marked it, they're not even, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. So those are my rectangles. So if I'm going to use the left endpoints, that means I'm going to use where I have f of 0 as one of them, where I have f of 50 is the next one, f of 100, f of 150, f of 200, f of 250, and I'm going to stop there because that'd be my 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, right? Okay, so that means I'm going to find the areas, which means base and height of 6 different rectangles. So let me write these out so that I don't forget what I'm doing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to have 6 rectangles that I'm finding areas for. For each one of them, the base is 50. This is 50, this is 50, this is 50, right? So my bases are all 50. Okay, my heights are those y values. So that first one was 450. My second one at 50 was 362. My third one was at 100. That was 305. My next one was 268, 245, and 156. Notice I didn't use this one at all because I'm not using the right endpoint there. So just be careful with that. Don't just plug all of them in. I'm just using the left-hand side. And most of you could figure that out just by looking at this. You don't necessarily have to draw a picture, right? Okay, so if I multiplied every one of those little sections and then I added it all up, so I'm not going to bore you with all of that calculator detail, but that ended up at 89,300 units squared. So just check that and make sure that's what you get. And to me, that looks like an overestimation, because if I look at this stream, it looks like all of those rectangles are hanging over on the side, so that's an overestimation. The next one wants me to do the right endpoints. So this time, I'm going to start on the right-hand side of my rectangles. So the right-hand side of this subinterval right here would be right there. So this time I'm not using this 450 at all. I'm starting here and using this one. Then I'm going to use this one. Then I'm going to use this one, this one, this one, and this one is all the way down here at 0. So I have kind of a shortcut for this one. You're really doing the exact same thing that you did here, except you're not using this first rectangle. Instead, you're using the last rectangle, which would have been plus 50 times 0 in this case, because that one was 0. So you could write it out again if you want. 50 times 362 plus 50 times 305, and so on. I'm just going to put a dot, 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 and do 50 times 0 as my last one. So hopefully you understand where those are coming from, my base and my height. Again, I had 6 subintervals, so that's why this one is so similar. So this one ends up 66,800 units squared. Now, again, this one, all of those rectangles, if I don't think about those top ones, I only think about the bottom ones, my stream was kind of on the outside of all of that, which means this one is an underestimation because I'm not getting this area here and this area here and this area here. I'm kind of missing all of those, right? And all of that one. So that tells me this one is an underestimation. On the AP exam, they ask you a lot about that. So one way to talk about it is that this is a decreasing function, and I'm using a right endpoint sum, which means it's going to be an underestimation. So we'll talk more about that fancy terminology as we get closer to the AP exam. Okay, the last one is the midpoint rule. This one should be the most accurate out of all of them, even if I'm using a smaller amount of subintervals, which I am in this case. This one is saying just use 3 rectangles this time. So be really careful when you're doing these. Don't assume that they're all going to be the same amount of rectangles. This one's only 3. So if I'm just going to do 3 subintervals, that means I've got this one, and then this one, and then this one. So I've got from 0 up to 100, from 100 up to 200, and from 200 up to 300. So there's my 3 subintervals. And I'm going to use the midpoint of each of those, which means I'm using 50, 150. That's a 5. I've got messy handwriting, sorry. And then this one was 250. Those are my 3 midpoints. Okay. So my area in this case is going to be, what's my base on every one of these? It's 100 across. So I've got 100 times whatever my height is going to be. So I'm going to leave that blank for a second. And then I'm going to have another 100 times a height, and then another 100 times a height, because I have 3 subintervals on this one. So my first one was at 50. F of 50 was 362. So that's what I'm putting in for my first height. My second height was at 150. 150, I'm at 268. My third one, my height was at 250, so I'm using 156. And if I multiply those and add them up, I end up with 78,600 units squared, which again, I told you this one should be a more accurate representation. If you look at these, this one was an overestimation, this was an underestimation, this one is more accurate. So it's right in the middle.